All right, guys, I think it's about time we should start talking about Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3, because it's really about that time we should start talking about it. I mean, Remake released about 5 years ago, and then Rebirth released about last year. And the developers are already talking about that the game, as far as Part 3 is concerned, is at a playable state. It's actually functional, it's playable, and the game is moving along really, really well when it comes to how far in development the game is. And I believe even the voice actors have already started voicing their lines for Part 3. So I think we can start expecting some previews or a teaser trailer. I wouldn't be surprised at the Game Awards, by the end of the year, we actually get a teaser to Final Fantasy VII Part 3. I'm expecting the game to release probably around 2027. It could release next year, but I would say 2027. And that'll also mean I'll be 40 years old. I'll be sending my daughter to college. She'll be 18. Man, time is flying by. It's flying by so fast. And the fact is that it took all the way into 2027 to release all 3 parts, which is mind-boggling to me that we even having a discussion about a Final Fantasy VII Remake that's broken into 3 parts, and we had a course of an 8-year time span by the time all 3 parts had released. I mean, at this point, I would have waited 8 years for a full, complete Final Fantasy VII Remake to actually play it at its full experience, opposed to breaking into 3 parts. But we're going to go into a little bit more of that and why they decided to go on to their approach. But yes, Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3, I don't really have confidence in it at all as far as the narrative are concerned. And I always wanted to stress this and make this clear when it comes to the Final Fantasy VII Remake trilogy. There is things that I do like about it, but there's damn sure some things and a lot of things that I hate about it. And that's more so in the narrative aspect that I really hate about the Final Fantasy VII Remake trilogy. But as far as the gameplay, the combat, it's super addictive. I always want to make this clear because a lot of people always mix this up, and say that I'm just a downright Final Fantasy VII Remake trilogy just hater in general. No, there are aspects that they've done right, but there's a lot of aspects that they have completely done wrong. And I'm here to always call it out. But if you're new to this channel and you just want a quick history of what I thought about Final Fantasy VII Remake in this trilogy so far, you can definitely check out the videos, especially starting with the first video of Final Fantasy VII Remake, where I gave my actual thoughts and opinions. And I said, you know what? This isn't it. This isn't it at all as far as the story is concerned. You can go check out that video. Definitely check that video out because that pretty much brought a lot of traction to my channel as far as Final Fantasy VII is concerned. And the rest has been history from there. And then, of course, last year, one of my biggest YouTube videos as far as length and duration and time that I put into this video, it was about over an hour long of me talking about Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I actually did a breakdown from gameplay all the way down to the story elements to break down the stupid multiverse aspects of the game and everything. And I broke it into chapters. So you can also go check that out as well. So let's continue forward. For starters, when it comes to Final Fantasy VII Remake, especially Part 3, they already assured us that the game is going well in development. So, as I said before, we should be able to expect it sometime in either 2026, which I doubt, but I'm confident and more confident that we will probably most likely get in 2027. But another thing that they also mentioned is what they tried to do is, when it comes to this remake trilogy, they just tried to reassure us that actually the game sales are going really, really well. Now, if you have watched my channel, we talked about Final Fantasy VII Rebirth as far as its sales, and the game did not do well sales wise. Now you got some people saying, see, I told you Final Fantasy VII Remake trilogy Rebirth is doing actually well. No, sales are now picking up because they released it on the PC. Because if Final Fantasy VII as a whole, this remake trilogy was doing so well, then they wouldn't have took this game and put it on multiple platforms. This game would have stayed as a Sony exclusive if they was that confident in terms of sales. Now we're actually getting a release of Final Fantasy VII Remake Integrate on the Xbox Series X, and of course on the Nintendo Switch too. We're getting those on their platform. And if it did so well, then they wouldn't have did a whole thing to where they're actually trying to reboot the company itself, which I've also done a video on. Because of the sales of Final Fantasy 16 and of course the Final Fantasy VII Remake, which should have really made blockbuster sales for them. This is Final Fantasy VII we talking about here. Final Fantasy VII should have been the game that really put Square Enix back on top again. But they screwed it up because of the decisions that they made by breaking this game not only into 3 parts, but actually taking this game story and flipping it on its head. And I think a lot of it definitely does have to do with the deceptive marketing that they had put behind Final Fantasy VII Remake Trilogy. Now, the thing that I hate the most when it comes to Final Fantasy VII Remake Trilogy is the fact is that when it comes to this fan base, I've never seen a fan base like this. Some of the most toxic fan base I've ever seen, down to the shipping community and those who love the OG and those who love the Remake Trilogy. And as I said before, my review on Final Fantasy VII Remake brought so much shit, it wasn't even funny, but I digress. But what I hate the most when it comes to this Remake Trilogy is the fact is that now all of a sudden, from a lot of these fans, we have this revisionist history of what we want from a Final Fantasy VII Remake. Do you guys remember that Final Fantasy VII tech demo that we had years ago on the PS3? Remember? And when we first saw that tech demo, what did all fans, including myself, even OG fans, have said? Square, this is what we want from a Final Fantasy VII Remake, right? We said we want a Final Fantasy VII Remake, right? We didn't say, and now that we're seeing this revisionist history where you have fans saying that, well, I didn't want a one-to-one remake at all. What I wanted was something like this, you know, doing something different with the Final Fantasy VII brand. This is what I always wanted. That is a bold-faced lie. That's a lie. And what's so crazy about it is that Square Enix was able to gaslight an entire fan base into believing this is what a remake is. This is not a remake. This is a reimagine. They took familiar characters, familiar locations, just telling a different story. The themes of Lost is gone. Now we're talking about multiverses, different worlds, different realms. We're talking about everything but what the original Final Fantasy VII and the core theme and the elements was all about. None of that is actually there. None of it's there at all. And they were able to gaslight the fan base into believing this is what a remake is when it's not. You know what a remake is? A perfect remake is? And I always go back to this example. A perfect remake is Capcom's Resident Evil 1 remake. That is a remake. Because it took all of the best elements and kept everything intact of what made the original game fun as far as the story, locations, layouts, and all they did was add to it. They added to the experience. And if they did have to remove certain things to meet modern standards, or they improved it, they just replaced it with something better. Final Fantasy VII Remake was not replaced, didn't replace anything and made it better at all. This isn't a remake. This is a completely different game. Completely different game. And the sad part about it is, my brothers who never played Final Fantasy VII, and I know a lot of you guys would make this also excuse, well, the original one always exists. That's not the point. I wanted to play the original game, but with modern sensibilities. That's what I wanted to play. And my brothers who never played the original, and I have also friends who never played the original, but they always hear me and talk about Final Fantasy VII so passionately, they wanted to experience that original game. And as I said before, they don't want to play the original game because of how old it is. It didn't age well. But for me, I can play the old game because I started with the old game. I have that nostalgia for the old game. I can play that game. But a lot of them don't want to go back and play PS1 graphics. They don't want to play polygons. Well, you got PC mods. They don't want to do none of that. They would love to play, they would love to experience what I experienced, but with modern day technology. And guess what? They were robbed of that. They were robbed of that the moment they picked up the controller and started playing the game. I had my friends call me up and says, bro, especially when Zach appeared in the game, they asked, bro, did this happen in the game? Who the fuck is this guy? Why are you dressed like Cloud? All it did was confuse more players. It confused the newer players. They have no idea. And this game is supposed to be friendly to newer players, but it's actually not, because you still have to have history, previous knowledge of the original game. in order for you to understand or at least get an idea of what's going on. All of my friends who got the game on the strength of me, because they thought they were going to get something similar to what I experienced, they get the game and they're asking all these questions because they're confused. They don't know what the hell is going on. Arbiters of Fate, you know, Zack, who this Zack character is, what is going on. And I'm the person who had to tell them, no, this did not happen in the original game. I don't know what the hell is going on. I'm trying to figure this stuff out. And it seemed to me when it comes to Square Enix and the development team behind Final Fantasy VII Remake is that they were in a tough spot because the developers wanted to make something different. They realized, and they said in a few interviews, that Final Fantasy VII maybe even be their last game because they're getting older, they're getting closer to retirement, and they've spent about 8 years. They're going to spend about 8 to 10 years working on this game. So, I believe like actually 15 years or whatever like that. Because remember, they started the development way earlier than that with CyberConnect, and they had to end up canceling it and bringing the game in-house. So it's about like 15 years. So they want to go out with a bang. They want to go out and make a completely different game, opposed to retreading the same thing over again. I kind of understand that, but this is Final Fantasy VII that we're talking about. If anything, you should just made a new game entirely in general. If that is the case, a new Final Fantasy game. But this is Final Fantasy VII that you guys decided to bastardize as far as the story is concerned. But then you have the younger generation within Square Enix who wanted to keep the game as faithful as possible. So there was a fight in the studio between the younger generation who grew up with Final Fantasy VII and then the old heads. It was the old heads that wanted to change everything. So they had to come up with a compromise to satisfy both older gamers of the OG, and then to also bring in newer fans who'd never been introduced to Final Fantasy VII before. And this is where you get the Arbiters of Fate. This is where you get this whole mishmash of them not fully committing to what they really want to do with the game. And I think that's where I have an issue with as well. Because if they announced at the very beginning that Final Fantasy VII Remake is going to be a sequel or a completely different Final Fantasy game, 7 game, a different take on it, I would have been more receptive of it, because all I had to do is change my expectations. I would have been more open to it. But the fact is of the deceptive marketing where they pretty much show all the familiar beats and everything, that was the thing that really got all of us really excited, thinking that we were actually going to get a legitimate remake, but with some new additions added to the game. And we didn't get that. And in fact, you can check out one of my videos where I talked about a difference between a remake and a reimagine. You can check out that video. I even posted a diagram where I showed you my version of Final Fantasy VII Remake and how I would approach it by keeping everything one-to-one, but taking certain aspects from the remake that had changes, or when you say changes, but additions to make the story even better and improve it by adding those additions in there. So there's a diagram, you can check it out, but you can check out the complete video where I did that complete breakdown if you're interested in that. I'll leave that in the link in the description below, or the card. You can just click on it and go there. But I should have known better the moment that they said that the game is going to be broken into 3 parts. Now, there's a lot of excuses that people make, especially the developers, where they were saying that the game is just too big. They wouldn't be able to fit all that, you know, because of how massive it is, because they have the overworld map and all these other type of things. And now we're starting to find out that's even more bullshit as you go through, is because you have games like Expedition 33 who masterfully, this is a masterclass of how to do not only a turn-based RPG, but a traditional RPG with an overworld map and everything. If they wanted to, they could have did that. But in my personal opinion, they broke it into 3 parts because then they can justify putting a price tag of $60 to $70 on these games, because they already knew that breaking into 3 parts, these are different games. They can treat these as different games, because now that we got our hands on Remake, it is a different game. It's not the same game. So breaking into 3 parts justifies the pricing for them to charge us 3 times for a one whole complete experience game that the original game was. So they knew exactly what they were doing in that case when it comes to Final Fantasy VII Remake Trilogy. They knew exactly what they were doing when it come to that. But Expedition 33 pretty much put cracks and holes and their thought process, because they definitely could have gave us a full complete game. And a lot of people say, well, you mean Final Fantasy VII was 3 discs? No, actually Final Fantasy VII was actually 1 disc. Is that the CG cutscenes had forced Square Enix to break the game into 3 discs, but everything could have fit on 1 disc if they didn't have CG cutscenes. So that's what goes to show how much they could have made this game into a full complete experience, but instead they wanted to break the game into 3 parts to justify it, charging us full price for the game. And also they also said that, well, you know, you guys would have to wait a long time if we did the game in 1 part. I would have been happy with that. I would have been completely happy if they would have just left, if they would have just waited and just took 8 years of development and just gave it to us in 1 part. But now look what you have now. By breaking it into 3 parts, you had divided the community, especially when it comes to Final Fantasy VII Remake. And then when Integrate came out, it was only exclusive to the PS5 at the time. So those who bought it on the PS4 but don't have a PS5 couldn't buy Integrate. And then once Rebirth came out, a lot of people still don't have a PS5. A lot of people still holding on to their PS4s at that time. And now you have an even smaller install base, and then you already have fans who thought they were getting the original left. They didn't want to play and continue on with the series anymore because they didn't get what they asked for. So now you have an even smaller install base, this is why the sales were affected. The Final Fantasy VII Rebirth starting made less than Remake when Remake launched within its first 2 weeks and everything. And then that's when they had to realize that, yo, we made a mistake. Now, you also have to pray to God that Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3 doesn't launch around the time PS6. Because, yes, we are going to get PS6. Sony's already talking about PS6 already. And chances are PS6 could be right around the corner. PS6 could come out 2027 or 2028. So they could actually delay Final Fantasy VII Part 3 if they want to and make that a PS6 release if they want to do that. So now you have an even more divided community when it comes to this game. It's a complete mess. It's a complete mess. But to get back to what I want to talk about before I close out this video, I want to talk about Part 3 for a second. Because my biggest question is whether or not will these developers down at Square Enix stick the landing with Final Fantasy Part 3? Will they stick the landing with this? Was it all worth it? That's why I'm still playing. That's why I'm moving on. I'm already invested in it. I want to see how this is going to turn out. And a lot of you guys respect the fact that I'm doing this because you guys don't want to play the game. A lot of you guys want to see how much of a shit show this is. And I'm the one to be able to play and report it back to you guys when it comes to this. I'm a Final Fantasy VII fan. I have a love-hate relationship due to what Square Enix has done to it. They have bastardized it. But when it comes to Part 3, I really want to see how they wrap all of this up. Was it was it really worth it at the end? Because this can make or break them. This can actually ruin the legacy of Final Fantasy VII. This could actually ruin the legacy of it. Yes, the original is still there. But you have to understand, even though the original is still there, people's only going to remember the modern version of Final Fantasy VII. They're not going to remember the original. Only we will remember the original. People are only going to remember what's the mainstream, what's out there right now. So this game represents Final Fantasy VII. I don't care what excuses you make. I don't care what you say about this, well, the original still exists. That does not matter. People's only going to remember the modern version of this game and the imprint and the impact that it left on the gaming community. That's what people's going to remember. And this Part 3 better be so damn epic that with all this shit that I was talking for the past couple of videos, it better make me eat my words. Because if this game fails as far as the narrative is concerned, if the narrative doesn't tie this up in a tight bow and bring this full circle to where it actually makes sense in a satisfying way, to where I say, you know what? Okay. Hats off to you. Square, you did a good job. Kitase, Nomura, all you guys did a good job with this. I was completely wrong. Because if you follow me on this channel, I am the first to always to admit when I'm wrong about something. I'm always willing to eat my words, because that makes you a respectable person. You know what I'm saying? When you're wrong about something, you can admit it. I don't mind. I don't care about humiliation. If they pull this off with Part 3 and this ends up being something epic and it ends up becoming my favorite version, I'm willing to take back anything and everything I said about this game. But as far as I'm concerned right now, it does not look like it. It does not look like it at all. And the thing that really concerns me is if by the time we get to the end and everything ends up reverting back to the original game, meaning that Aerith, no matter what, Aerith is going to die, no matter what, Zack is going to die, no matter what, Biggs is going to die, no matter what, and everything revert back to the original, then I would say this. Then what was the fucking point? What was the point of all that? If all it's going to do is bring about the same outcome as the original, then what was the point of changing all that? Because to me, it feels like they're not committing to anything. It's like at one point they're trying to commit to the original game, and then after that they're trying to make it feel like it's a sequel to Final Fantasy VII. If you want to make a sequel to Final Fantasy VII and you want to make this a completely different game, then make it a completely different game. Don't give us all the nostalgia parts and then twist it and then turn around and then give us something completely different. And then get to the end in part 3 and make the outcome the same as the original game. Then you could have just gave us the original game. You should have just gave us the original game to begin with. Then that doesn't make any sense. So I'm hoping, I pray to God that these guys somehow miraculously pull some fucking miracle to convince me that everything that they've done since the part 1 and Rebirth was all worth it. All worth it. And the thing that also cracks me up about this trilogy is that there's so many people with confidence talking as if they know what the outcome is going to be. And we're always going to go in the comment sections and tell me about Aerith and this is actually the live stream and all this other type of stuff, as if that is the definitive answer. They don't know. Everybody who talked about at the end of the remake was so sure that certain things were going to be what it was, and then we get the Rebirth, it contradicted everything, or it went against all their predictions. We don't know what part 3 is going to end up being and how it's going to end. So stop speaking with confidence, especially a lot of you guys who always go to Maximilian, which, no shade against Maximilian. I love Maximilian's content, especially when it comes to fighting game. But when it comes to Final Fantasy VII, I don't take anything at face value with this guy when it comes to Final Fantasy VII. Like, to me, I see him as a shield for Square Enix when it comes to this, because there's no way in the world, especially someone as an OG fan like Maximilian, can say that this is the best game ever. He literally said, Rebirth, this is the best game ever. He said it on a stream, and it blew my mind. It blew my mind. So I don't take anything as far as Final Fantasy VII is concerned from Maximilian. I don't take any of that serious. But there's a lot of you guys who go in the comment section and just spill out the same theories that Maximilian. You just regurgitate what he says and then you try to spill it out to me. I don't care. I really don't. But this game is better stick to landing. Because if it doesn't, this is really going to hurt the legacy of Final Fantasy VII. I don't care if the originals still exist. People's only going to remember Final Fantasy VII for what it is today, not what it used to be. Only by the mark that it lays today. And if it doesn't succeed as far as sticking the landing, as far as bringing this all together, Katase, Nomura, all the monsters, they should just retire. Just leave. Just retire. Because I'll be 40 years old and I always wanted a Final Fantasy VII remake, and now I don't got that. And you know what would actually be crazy is if they end up remaking it again, but remake it to the original. But by that time, I'll be 60 years old, and with grandkids. That'd be crazy if that ends up happening in that case, you know. But that pretty much wraps everything up. I want to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. I know I ranted on for so long. I know it probably doesn't have any type of flow to this video. This was just more like a rant and just going off the top of my head about how I feel about Final Fantasy VII Remake Trilogy and Part 3. I don't even know what Part 3's name is going to be. We got Remake, Rebirth. Some people saying Requiem. Some people saying all kinds of other stuff. Like, we don't know. We do not know. But hopefully they can convince me. Hopefully they can show me that, hey, it was all worth it in the end. But I doubt it. But I can be a man and say that I'm wrong if it happens to pull off something miraculous. And I pray to God that they do. So that wraps up this video. If you like the video, hit the like button, subscribe button. And if you want to hear more of my rants or me just talk about Final Fantasy VII in general, definitely check out my streams and definitely hit that notification bell. This is MugenLord, sign off. I'll see you Game Fiends later. Peace out.